In the last video, we addressed both billing and payment. And in the payment screen, obviously, you need to have some method of producing an invoice copy for a client or a long-term person that's staying for a long period of time. As we pointed out, persons that are long-term can have a lot of items as far as their payments are concerned. Now, there are two different invoices that you can use in the application. Let's go over to the app navigation and go down here. You'll see that there's a short version and a long version. When you create a payment and a room billing, that information is translated into an invoice. So let's go look at that. If you go to look at the first one where we're in the record that we're reviewing, it brings up the invoice for that particular screen. Now, if you have a position where you want to just print one invoice for a short invoice for, say, somebody who's staying for a few days or a day, you can use the short invoice. And what it does basically is it has up to 24 items that it'll put on the and print from this screen. So what you would do is you would come into the screen. Let me point out a few things. You would have your business name at the top, you edit that, and in here where you tap in, you can add a photo from the photo library of your logo to add your logo or whatever you want on the invoice itself. You can add both of those. I want to point out some of the things on here that you need to be aware of. If you click on the booking ID, it will not allow you to edit unless you're in the find mode. When you're in the find mode, as we did on the prior screens when we were doing the payments, where we're looking up on the list view, if you're looking for a particular invoice, what you would do is you do a do find, start the find, and then you put in the invoice number that you're looking for. If you were working with the record and you came over to the screen, you're looking at the related record from the person that you were in. So all the information should be translated from the booking screen right to the invoice you want to print. So it'd be very straightforward. There are times, obviously, if you have a long stay person and they have exceeded 24 line items, then you're going to have to use the next level of invoice. Before we leave here, though, let's point out some of the things on this screen. This is the printing area. This will not be printed. So if you go to your do action and you say print record here, what you're going to get is just this area, and this area over here will be omitted, and you won't see any of this stuff in the print. Obviously, you should set this up prior to doing the invoices so that you have your business name and your icon, logo, or whatever in this screen. And that way it'll be what we call a global, and every time you open up the invoice, that information would be provided in here. The next thing is you see that it does have a company area over here. So if this is both a individual or a company or both, you would have the information for both of those in there. If you don't have a company, then this area over here would stay blank, and this is what you're billing to, and vice versa. It's a good idea to use, if you're using a company, to also have the individual that's being billed for that company information. Down here is a summarization of the information for the actual billed items based on the information that's in the rows in the invoice. Okay, this is the individual invoice for one print, where you do one page. Let's go look at the long invoice. The long invoice is quite a bit different. Now, this application is set up that it will use the iOS single user version, or it can be used on Mac, Windows, or on the cloud. And this is basically set up for that, and I'll explain why. If you're looking for a date or date range, it will work on the Mac and Windows and cloud versions. But on the iPad and iPhone, what happens is there is a situation where when you click on the window for a date, so like if I came over here and I wanted to use the date that it was paid on as far as the date that I'm searching for, it will give you a scroller, and you cannot edit to add the greater than or equal to or less than or equal to for the date. So there's a different approach for doing this. In this screen, what you would do is you would start your find or just click on the ID for this particular invoice. But basically what you'd want to do is go ahead and click find and pick the invoice ID from the booking ID up here and put that in there. So, and in the same way as we did in the list view prior to this, you can do a range of icons, booking IDs if you want to, or you can do individual invoices for each booking ID. Now, what you'll find here is that the booking ID for the information is related to that one single person, and all the invoice items that are in that particular record. So what you may end up by having to do is click into a record and then omit those particular rows out of the record in order to make that so that you can see just what you want to have billed in the invoice. Because if it's billed, it's going to be billed for the things that still have a balance to them, or if they're paid. You may show, for example, some of the things that are paid and some that are not. If it's a long-term stay person, or it's somebody that is actually paying rent and staying in your lodging, and they're going to be there for days or weeks or maybe even a month. Some people have long-term, 6 months or longer. So you would want to omit whatever records that you don't want in the record, and you can just click in there and omit those, or do a find based on that information that you're looking for in the invoice. It's not that difficult actually when you look at it, how it's done. Now you can also do a situation where the booking ID, if a person comes and goes, you can have a different booking ID for a short-term stay or maybe a medium term where somebody's there for a week. You can create a new record for the same person. Say they come every month or 6 months or something like that. It would be a different booking ID that would cover those items for that period of their stay. There are people that you want to bring back to your facilities and your lodging over a period of time, and this application allows you to locate those people and have their information to contact them on an ongoing basis to see if they're going to return for another season or another visit. So that's part of what you want to do by keeping this information and having it available to you. Plus, you have a record of all the past charges and everything that are summarized for your billing and your income statement on quarterlies, annuals, for income tax or whatever purposes. So that's some of the things you want to do in here. Now I'm going to just repeat. If you want to do a booking list where you're going to look for a range or under individual icons, you start the find and use the booking ID, or use it down here for the booking ID to find that. Either way will work. Okay, if you're on the Windows and PC version, Mac version, cloud version, you can use the date range using the date range here. Okay, so let's just do one just so we can see how it works. I'm going to start the find. I'm going to go in here. I can do it either way, up here or down here, and I'm going to put in the number 1. And the way you do that is go over to keyboard, put in the number 1, and now that it's in there, you don't have to use the go. Just go up here and do perform the find. And invoice number 1 is there. You see I omitted 5 invoice records and I put up the number 1. Now obviously if this person had 1 to the number of invoice items and you were showing the balance that's due, you're going to see a balance due here. So you could show everything that is in here for a week or more, and then it would still show you the balance due and the payments that are due and the payments that were actually paid and all the summary of all that information. And the date paid in this particular case would be relative to the period, like starting March 22nd through whatever period they paid those. So this is how you would do this, and it would work on the application for showing long-term, or I can omit, like I said, I can omit anything off of this by going up and doing omit. Maybe I want to take out the items that were already paid for and only show the individual balance that's due for some period of time. And that's what you would do with your long-term people. So I hope I'm clear on that. So you can, if you have any questions, you can always come back and ask those questions. Okay, let's go back to booking. The last summary portion of this is that if you look in here, you always want to make sure that the payment or has a balance. If it's balance due, then you want to run that. And I showed you in the list view over here, where if you have billing list view items that are still due, you can go in and you can look at the list view here, and you can see that there would be a balance due if somebody has one. You can also go down to the payment list view, and the payment list would show also the balance due here, like this person, and these are paid. Interestingly enough, if you do a find, like I said before, and then you come to these, you may see just those records, or you can do a find here, and what it'll do is it'll carry over into the invoice as far as that particular booking ID and show just the payments that are due over on that side. Okay, if you have questions, as I said before, go ahead and contact me, and I'd be very happy to help you. You can do that by clicking on the developer website over here on Do Action right here, and that'll take you to the developer site where you can start a chat. Thank you.